Energy. It is all around us, both seen and unseen. It affects all the lives within humanity, our great planet Earth, and the entire universe. It is a conscious cosmic matrix, an ever-evolving cycle, creating, breaking down, and recreating. This is Connected with your host, Andrea Dragonfly. Andrea tells us that energy is the foundation of our human experience, intrinsically affecting every facet of our lives, our perceptions, choices, and actions, as well as the challenges, opportunities, and people we attract. So now, please welcome the host of Connected, Andrea Dragonfly.
Hello, happy Halloween. Welcome to Connected and the Halloween show. So it's going to be exciting to talk about the season. There is so much that can be talked about around this very specific holiday in the calendar of the year. So we had talked several episodes back during summer solstice even, and I brought out the cycles of the year. And so we are exactly at a midway point between fall equinox and winter solstice, which are 6 weeks past was fall equinox. 6 weeks from this weekend is going to be winter solstice. And so we're in what we know as the celebrations of death. And they're known by many cultures with different names. And so each culture is going to celebrate the death culture in their own way. And so we're going to talk a little bit about all of that and how the celebration of, why do we celebrate this? It's also known as the beginning of the new calendar year, even. So this is especially true for Europe and for the Northern Hemisphere during the time of the Celts and whatnot. And so some of the earth-centered cosmologies and ideologies of Europe. And I'm your host, Andrea Dragonfly. And so welcome to the Halloween special on Halloween and All Hallows Eve and what it's really all about. So thank you. Thank you for joining me. Some of you may be experiencing trick-or-treaters right now, even since it's within the evening time for the United States in particular. So that's a very fun and exciting time. I even wore my Celebration of Death shirt. My mother got this shirt for me some time ago, and it's really just, I want to say, it's dancing till dead and beyond. Because even within the celebration of life, it's the dancing, it's the coming together, and it's the celebration of what was. So as we move into sharing more about, the celebration of death, this is that season where, excuse me, I have to clear my throat. I'm not quite sure what's going on here. So my apologies on that. However, this is the third harvest holiday within the wheel of the year. So it's also, if we look at the calendar of the year and that wheel of the year, the first harvest festival is in August, right around August 1st, August 2nd, also known as Lammas. And then the second, that's where we first begin to, celebrate with the barleys and the grains and the making of the beers and whatnot. And so this is where you have like your Highland games and you have your different types of, summer festivals where everybody's coming together to show their strength and what they've been growing over the season and the very first harvest. And then we move into fall equinox, Mabon, and this is the second harvest. This is where we really move into the fall season, and so the harvesting really begins, and we begin to look back and see, wow, look at my garden. This is really full of all sorts of different fruits and vegetables, or vegetables in particular. If you have fruit trees, great. But we begin to start the process of harvesting. A lot of my tomatoes certainly weren't fully ready at the beginning, mid-September. It seemed like they all kind of came into full life right around the end of September, but nonetheless, right? And so now we're at the part of the calendar where we are really coming into the final harvest. So this is also throughout time, throughout history, this was the harvest of the root vegetables. This is the harvest of the livestock as well. And so this is the preparation of, for the winter months, what's to come. And so a lot of the harvesting, the slaughtering of the animals, then there's the whole kind of like, dressing the animals and preparing them for like jerky so that they can be eaten, throughout the season. But it's definitely that part of the death, right? And so looking at this through the calendar of the year, the title of the show is Celebrations of Death, Endings and Beginnings. Now, before we really jump in, there's something also very significant to talk about tonight because it's very powerful. It's happening tonight into tomorrow morning. So we have what's called the new moon happening in Scorpio. And so this is a very powerful time because if we're looking at this ending, we're looking at the death. And I'm going to definitely dive in and look at this from many different angles. But we're also looking at the opportunity to set something into motion. And I talked about how new moon, which is the dark side of the moon, it's the dark time of the moon. It's when the moon is traveling with the sun, as if they're holding each other's hand as they, are crossing through the sky during the daytime. So it's that dark time of the night where we get to fill that darkness with our dreams, with our wants, our desires. And so within the new moon or the lunar cycle, we have the new moon, first quarter moon. A week later, 2 weeks later, we have the full moon. And then we have the third quarter 3 weeks later. And 4 weeks later, we start the new moon over again. And so back this summer, we talked about the hero's journey and how you could do the hero's journey with the moon phases. Well, right now, we're looking at the beginning of this opportunity to really kind of set an intention for this new moon. And there's so much happening on a planetary level, so much happening on a global level, so much happening in North America, and especially with the US elections, presidential elections. And so this is that time for us to really kind of connect into that new moon. What is it that we deeply desire? So working with Scorpio, and again, I'm not an astrologist. I've certainly been working with it for many, many decades even, and so I encourage you to look this up. Go to YouTube, look up what the new moon is all about. So I will share what I do know, but Scorpio is that, it's a water sign, and it's that deep part of ourselves. It's that deep desire that lives within us. And Scorpio is also very connected into sexuality, sensuality, and those deep desires that live within. And so thinking about sexuality and is that creation. It's creative, and it's that water element of emotion. So this is like what is living within you that hasn't fully been birthed yet, that hasn't fully come out into your life to bring fulfillment. And so even so, we can look at this, like, I put in my post on the social medias, is that like the only thing that's really haunting us right now, except for those who might actually have energy attachments. But for the most part, the only thing that's really haunting us are like past wounds and unfulfilled desires and dreams. And so this is the perfect time. It's like going to the graveyard, and it's like it's like digging your own little grave plot and putting those wounds in there, putting those parts of ourselves that have blocked us from truly feeling like we can bring forth our greatest dreams and desires. Sometimes there's that part of us that feels like, oh, I'm never going to be accepted, or I'm embarrassed to truly show who I, deeply who I am and what I deeply desire for myself. And so it's those dreams and desires that Scorpio is really bringing to the surface for us in this new moon. And so the opportunity, because we don't always get a new moon in Scorpio, right on All Hallows Eve, is that this is the perfect time to think about it in that way. What do I want to let go of? What is blocking me or hindering me from really getting into that place in my life that I can just sit back and be like, oh my gosh, I finally have arrived to that place that feels so yummy and so good, right? So this is, an opportunity. So whether you have the time or if you have the wherewithal to take this into the evening after the show or early tomorrow morning. The new moon hits its peak at 6:47 p.m. for Mountain Time, which is where I live in Colorado. So that would then be 8:67. That would be 8:47 a.m. on the East Coast, and then 4:47 for Pacific Coast, right? So, so this is an opportunity to bring that forward and use this really awesome time to bury those parts of ourselves that are ready to die, that we don't want to bring into the new year. We don't want to bring into where we're going, into the trajectory of humanity with where everything is right now, even in the politics and even within, just Pluto coming back into Aquarius. And some of this may sound confusing to many of you, but this is cultural change which is about to happen here. And of course, within the politics of the United States, we have two very opposing shifts that can happen here. And so we'll talk about that after we see what ends up happening. But it's also just very interesting to know that this is the time for us to lay to rest, to recognize that there's a part of ourselves that maybe it's fear, it's an old wound pattern that keeps getting in the way, that really prevents us from fully realizing that dream that we've been always, holding deep within ourselves. So perfect time for that. And then also getting just back into the cycle, of this is that time of the death. And if we look at it naturally in nature, especially for North America and either, the Northern Hemisphere in particular, we get to see for many of us the seasons shifting, right? Of course, we're talking like, the far north part, because I think we're looking at the Tropic of, oh my goodness, you're going to have to please forgive me. So I think it's Tropic of Capricorn. So Cancer and Capricorn. I think Capricorn is the top one, right? And so when we're in that area, we get to have those seasons, and we see those seasons. The leaves are dropping their leaves, and everything is going back to the root system within the plant life. And if you are a gardener, which I do believe very few people are gardeners these days, however, with the cost of groceries and all that, I think more people have tried to grow vegetables, in the last year or so, and plan to do more of that than what has, normally been so. Because, connecting into the cycles of nature, connecting into the seasons, recognizing that we play these seasons out in our own lives. And when we connect into them, we actually expand our consciousness. We begin to see the interconnectedness of everybody's life trajectory, everybody's life, every year, how we're growing, and the different obstacles that come in our, throughout that year that are there specifically to grow us. And then usually at this time, we can begin to say, okay, these things have challenged me. I'm ready to put some of this to rest so that I can really reflect, because we're moving into what's called the composting time. if especially as a gardener, and especially as an herb, I have an herb farm here at my house. When I harvest all of that and I harvest my herbs, take what I want for medicine, and then I take the stalks and I put them into the compost pile, this is where the nutrients go back into the compost that are going to feed the new sprouts in the springtime. So we're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we get back, we're going to talk about that composting power. We're going to talk about the celebration of death and what it's really all about. Okay. And we're going to look at it from these different kind of perspectives of what it is in a year, what it is in a lifetime, what it is over a period of, of lifetimes even. So I'll see you back here in 2.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them. Rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies. Find settings that allow them to be the most productive and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Okay, welcome back. So, looking at All Hallows Eve, Halloween, the Day of the Dead, All Saints Day, All Souls Day, there are so many names and so many different celebrations around the world. Now, I will just kind of start that Halloween comes from All Hallows Eve, and it's actually a Christian naming of the and hallow is holy. It's another word for all the holy eve before the All Saints Day, which is for within the Christian holiday, November 1st. And then All Souls Day is November 2nd. Now, of course, with different cultures, these things are all going to shift around. Now, saints don't, not saints. Let me just back up for a second. So saints are not seen in all religions, right? Saints are very specific to Christianity. They're not in, Islam, and they're not in, Judaism. And so they are very specific to Christianity. But so what Christianity has done, though, is they've taken a lot of these earth-centered holidays and then they have put something on there, right? So that if people are going to celebrate, then we're going to bring them into celebrating this kind of different spin on it, right? Now, of course, this is the time of the year, the season, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, where we have what we call the thinning of the veils. And the veil is this energy field between our living conscious world that we do our everyday, mundane is the word for like everyday kind of living, our job, our work, our children, everything that goes on in our day to day. Now, during this time, it's almost like we can feel this shift in the energy. of course, with the trees letting, the deciduous trees letting go of their leaves and everything beginning to turn colors. If you're in a, in a place that allows the colors to change and you can see it before your eyes. So that shift is happening. And in that shift, it's been known for time, immemorable, that this is the time where we actually have a closer connection to our ancestors, to the spirits. And so many, of course, spirits can come back and visit us. And that's why we have these different types of celebrations. Now, when I was in college, I certainly got an anthropology degree, and one of my favorite subjects was the anthropology of death. And this was looking at death celebrations throughout time and memorable throughout all these different cultures, and and how each of these cultures would celebrate death in different ways or honor it, right? And so is fascinating. And this is, of course, where we get our horror stories from. And this is where we start to really get into a lot of different kinds of superstition and a lot of fear around the supernatural and around dark energies like, evil and malevolent, which is another kind of bigger word for, not very nice, nasty spirit energies, And so throughout history, yes, there's all sorts of information that comes through many different cultural stories. And we are at that time where what we do know is that, many people have celebrated, and like the Day of the Dead, especially within Latin American cultures and Central American cultures, is where they bring offerings and they celebrate. They bring, the family's, the loved one's favorite meal or candy or flowers or some of these, I'm going to call it the 3D, the third dimensional things that loved one really liked, so that they would come back and bring them information or wisdom or share with them what the other side was like, right? And so some people can have those connections, and the more that we tap in, the more and grow our consciousness, grow our awareness, and are open to this, we actually can communicate. And so it's not something that everybody can do easily. There's lots of blocks there. It's much easier, especially if you don't have any kind of things that are kind of clouding the energy field between you. So, people who, are smoking pot, drinking alcohol, those kinds of things, that creates another kind of like a thicker energy for that to process. And you can't really make those connections in the same way. However, when we're really kind of like interested in wanting to know, this is where we can get the message from our loved ones. We can, and so of course, this even moves through, even throughout, I'm just going to even say into the US, because I don't know if it's just basically myself and a lot of the, spiritual community that I kind of grew up in or whatnot, but I know that several people are always very interested and curious about that. And that creating that ancestral altar to bring, the honoring and the remembrance. It's always about that remembrance that even though you've come into my life, you made this incredible mark on my, my being, my heart, my soul, and I miss you and I honor you. And if there's any wisdom you have for me, or this is even an opportunity for us to focus on, how do we heal the lineage if we have some very specific lineage issues, right? So we can talk to our ancestors, and the ancestors, when they communicate back to us, is really, we have to listen, not just with our ears. We have to listen with some different senses. We have to just, sometimes they'll communicate with us by a card dropping out of a book that was sent. This was actually something that just happened to me a few weeks ago, where I was going through something and this holiday card fell out of the book from my dear beloved sister. and she would have just celebrated her 52nd birthday a couple of days ago on the 29th, and we are celebrating that she's been kind of gone. She left us about 8 years ago, and so it's very hard. And but she's with me, and of course, when I do my, beginning in October to almost nearing the end around Thanksgiving, I create, my ancestor altar to invite her and my father. My father also passed away as well, and this is about 7 years that he is now gone. And even my cat, I even have a sweet little set up for my cat. So I have those people who have been in my life, my ancestors, and I honor them, and I open myself to being able to receive information from them. And it's not always through whispers. It's not always, through the ways that we think that they're going to communicate with us. They can communicate with us, again, like I said. I found this card in the most random place, and it had the most beautiful message, and a message that I really needed to hear at that moment. And it's like, my dear sister, I love you so much. I honor you, right? So those types of things, you're like a song that will connect you, something that will show up in a random place, some sort of words that are going to, this is how the other side communicates with us sometimes. And so we just have to kind of raise our awareness to say, okay, what might that be? Maybe you might catch a certain flower. Maybe you might see somebody walking down the street that looks like that, that lost loved one. And so then whatever that information comes in, sometimes it's just that connection. I remember I was talking to my dear friend, and we were in shadow, and there's this light behind, like over to the side, and so he was very shadowed. And as we were talking, we came into this point where we were in silence, and in that silence, my father came through him, and I could clearly see my dad's face and his face. And I just started to smile, and I felt the love. And again, this is about 3 weeks ago, because this whole time, this whole month of October is so fruitful for connection, right? And so this is that time for us to really kind of come in and feel the love of those, and let them know that we still love them, and they will let us know that they're still there. And sometimes they can bring messages, maybe messages that we really wanted to hear, right? And so even looking at, the season, the celebration, the honor, the telling of stories, keeping their memory alive. They say that we're really gone. We're really no longer on the planet when the last person who knew us dies, right? Because then there's no more sharing of the memories. And so our memory is finally fading. And so this is the time to share those memories, keep those people alive, and whatever it was that they stood for. And, or the growth opportunity. Again, I talked about lineage healing. What was the wound within the family member that we can all as a family come together to look at, and how to work it out within ourselves so that we can heal that for our children and the lineage. So when we call into the ancestors, we call into all who have come before us, and great, the lineages as far as we can go, and all who come after us, because our children and their children and their children are bringing the energy through as well. So we can heal those lineage wounds, especially when we connect around this time of the season. We can actually alleviate some of that for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. So that's also one way to kind of like bring it into a different, approach to how do we look at this season? How do we want to celebrate this season? Now, I spoke a little bit again about horror films and whatnot, and a lot of people really get connected into the creepy and the haunting and the ghosts and the dark spirits and whatnot. And it's time for scary movies, and it's time for the haunted houses and the different types of kind of scary activities, the haunted corn maze and whatnot. And again, that yes, those things absolutely do exist as well. And that's why we kind of talked about the angels a couple of weeks ago, and really being able to recognize that these energies do exist, and that throughout time, and again looking at these different cultures, one of the reasons why even dressing up in Halloween costumes was because if you've done somebody wrong and they died, then that night when they come back and the veil is thin and they can kind of pierce through the veil and make contact with us, in our living, human forms, that they can't see who we are. It's kind of like, oh, we're going to fool you, right? So I'm going to dress up in this completely different kind of costume so that when you come back looking for me to take your revenge, you won't be able to find me, right? So that's kind of where that also came from. And then, of course, it just became more of a children's thing. It became like the trick or treat, and that also has to do with the spirits, and that has to do with when, either give me a trick or give me a treat, and then you pass so that the spirits won't come and play tricks on you, right? So if you give out, your generosity shows that you're willing to give so that you don't get tricked yourself. So there's also that play of that as well. And then even within the jack-o'-lanterns and the carving of the pumpkins, and originally that was usually the carving of the gourds, and they would put the candle in the gourds, and it would also be kind of like lanterns and whatnot as they were walking through the night. And then also, having the scary faces or whatnot would be ways to kind of ward off those dark spirits that say, this is a dark spirit, and this jack-o'-lantern or this carved gourd would then have the light, and the light of the divine. So that light of the divine would kind of scare away any of those dark forces that were interested in trying to create a little chaos. Because again, this is that time where the veil is thin and these spirits can come and play tricks, right? Play tricks, be a little chaotic, do things that are out of our ordinary, right? The paranormal, not the normal, right? And so we can look to see that throughout time and how we've adopted these old kind of cultural playful things that we may have lost. Where did they originate from, right? And so being able to tap in and saying, okay, well, how do we actually bring this back to a place that is not just about the scary dark forces, and it's not just about Halloween costumes, and it's not just commercialized, because that's really what it's become. It's become this huge commercialized holiday. And again, I love this time of the season, and I certainly have gone to my Halloween parties and all that kind of stuff. But I'm also deeply rooted in the truth of it all is, what it really means. Because now, as we start to look at this, again, this is that time of that celebration of life, and we're moving into the composting. So when we die, when I'm going to start with plant material, when I harvest my garden and I put all of the plant debris into the compost pile, and not everybody has a compost pile, I recognize that. But when we understand how the compost pile works, we understand aspects of consciousness and spirituality and the process of life, death, rebirth. Everything is right before our eyes. And again, if we live by the one life theory that you only get one life and you die, then of course you're completely severed from the connection. You're severed from that which really is right before you. You can witness it, right? So when we witness this, and we put those plants into the compost pile and we turn it and we stir it and we put some water on it and whatnot, you can put some compost activator on it if you want it to hurry itself up. What's happening is that final harvest is the nutrients. Like you're taking that in and you're informing your spirit. Now, I talked about how in the past we have our physical body, we have our emotional and our mental body that are in their own body connection. And then we have the soul body, and then we have the spirit body. And the spirit body is that body that keeps coming back every incarnation for multiple lifetimes for us to get a full spectrum of the human experience, right? And so that's the step that we're bringing into that spirit body. When a person dies, their body goes into goes into the earth to be composted. Now, of course, we have these crazy expensive, caskets that don't allow our body to be composed by the creepy crawlers, which play such a huge part in the decomposition process of taking physical matter. We live in the third dimensional world, which is about physical matter, the materialization of life, right? Everything we know is materialized in a 3D, well, for the most part, is 3D, three-dimensional. Well, this is where it breaks down. This is where we put it into the earth, and the earth breaks it down from its physical property and brings it back into a spiritual property. So if we think about particle, we are created of infinite, well, not infinite, but because we're constantly growing, atomic particles that create our body, right? And when they break down, we go from particle to wave energy, particle energy to wave energy. And that's the compost. That's the composting process. And in that composting process, we look to see that's the nutrients. That's the nutrients is going to fill the compost if we're working with plant material. It's the nutrients that's going to fill our spirit as information. What did we learn? What are we harvesting? What was this life cycle all about? Now, I'm looking at it from plants that can grow in a year's time, and then I brought it to a life cycle of a human being and the point when they die. Now we're also looking at this within our own life cycle of 1 year, going back to the calendar, the wheel of the year, and how this time of the year is the ending. And with endings come new beginnings, like that new moon in Scorpio that's going to be there for us tomorrow morning, right? And so looking at this, now we're going to take another quick 2-minute break. And when we get back, we're going to jump back into that cycle and flesh it out. All right, I'll see you back here in 2.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
It was almost instant, I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. Yeah, it feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com. plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, Hope, and Support for Caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Okay, welcome back. So, looking at the life cycle of ourselves. So, I'm going to state this one more time because I think this is incredibly important. It's so important for our rising consciousness, our expanding consciousness. When we can get this in our field, in our energy field, in our conscious awareness, we can begin to expand and connect, hence the show Connected, into so many other areas of our human existence. So again, this is the time of the death cycle. This is the holiday of death. In the Celtic version, it's also known as Samhain, but it's spelled like Samhain. So many people think it's called Samhain, but it's also, All Hallows Eve, Halloween. I mentioned all those different names, right? And so this is that, it's that part of the calendar of the year that marks the death process. And then from the next 6 weeks, is the composting process. It is the breaking down of particle, going back into wave. We're a particle, but when we die, we go back to wave. Our spirit goes up through the processes, which I've talked before about. I call the Kamaloka, where we go and we reflect on who we were in our life and how we might have hurt people, or anything we've done to somebody else, we're going to have reflected back to us in some way, right? And then we move up to what's called the Devachan. And the Devachan is that place where we get to commingle with our creators again, before we're preparing ourselves to come back for another cycle at it. And so this is that composting time. And that composting time, again, is bringing us, into that place of stillness. Stillness is at the core of every belief system, every cosmology, every religion, spiritual practice. If we want to connect into something that's greater than ourselves, we start with stillness. So we go back into the stillness, to the death process. But even in that stillness, things are churning. We're working it. We're figuring it out. We're trying to understand how that part of our life, and if we're looking at a year, because I'm bringing this into, and I'm kind of jumping around, but I'm trying to bring it, we're looking at it from, they're called fractals. We're looking at the fractal of 1 year of our growth versus a whole lifetime of our growth. So I'm kind of jumping back and forth. So if I'm confusing you, my apologies, because when we go to, Kamaloka, Devachan, this is when a person dies. When we die, this is where our spirit ends up going and then coming back down. So, but I'm bringing the connecting it here to this 6-week cycle, because in 6 weeks, we're going to come upon winter solstice. Winter solstice is that time of the deep reflection. So right now we're in the compost phase. So the deep reflection is a 6-week process between winter solstice and what's also known as February 1st, February 2nd, has many names as well, because every culture has a different name for it. It's also known as Candlemas, Imbolc, Michael, no, I think it's Michaelmas, maybe that's wrong. But it's the time of the light. It's that February, Brigid tide, whatnot, because the goddess Brigid was also part of, this, it's about the conception of life. It's where the spark of life comes back. So this period of time, the death ceremonies, the celebrations, bring us 6 weeks into the winter solstice, which is the time of the deep reflection, again, where all the churning and the turning ends and you actually go from the particle to the wave. The wave energy is winter solstice. And then that wave energy is when you go through Kamaloka, you go up through to Devachan, that's winter solstice. So right now we're in the process of getting there. We're in the process of shedding We have to shed our physical body. We have to shed our ether body. We have to shed our astral body before we can get to the place of stillness. So we're working, we're composting. We have to shed, let go, and those nutrients of information fill us. When we get to winter solstice, again, it's that time of looking at that life, looking at that year and bringing it back to now. If we look at this from 1 year, every year, and how it cycles, we look back on the year. What did I learn? If we look at it a lifetime, what did I learn in that lifetime? What was the theme of that lifetime? Now we look at what was the theme of that year. So we have 6 weeks of processing and really embodying the theme of the year, or that year, so that when, Imbolc or Candlemas comes on February 2nd, the new spark of inspiration of what we're going to learn in the next year begins to come into us. It's the conception of light, the spark of spirit, a part of on the journey that we then will birth out into the world for spring equinox. And then as that spring equinox, and we have that infant coming into the world, coming into existence, because we've been incubating it from the 6 weeks prior to that. Just like, if we would, a baby growing within our body. And men too, right? So this is where men get to experience the law of gender, where we're both, male and female. We're both egg and sperm. We're all going through this process. It's not, just for the women. It's not just for, gender specific people. So we're all in this. This is life. This is how the cycles of life live within us, right? And then again, and I did talk about this before, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time, but then we go into what's called Beltane, or the fertility festivals of May Day, right? And this is where, people are, having the May Day baskets, and they're the fertility of fertilizing the fields. And then you get into summer solstice, and this is where you're growing into your full potential, right? So summer solstice is June 20th area, 21st, and then you move into Lammas again, your first harvest. And so you're looking at how the intention of Imbolc grows, is birthed, and then from spring equinox to fall equinox is the cycle of its growth until it's getting ready for death again, right? And so then we move into this whole cycle of death, of death. And so when we recognize that we live these cycles every year, when we're going to always have something that is going to come up in our year, it's going to confront us. And some years might have something really big, and other years might have small things, because that is the growth cycle of our lives. We're going to have, we have these hierarchical themes. We have a theme that we were born into this world with, this incarnation. And the theme could be like, oh God, we all have our own unique theme. And so just trying to even say what the theme is like, there's so many, but let's just say the theme is really being able to step into leadership and communicate in a way. And if you knew, like maybe, growing up, like I couldn't always be heard, or if I spoke, like struggling with my communication. That was part of, people are like, oh, Andrea, you're a great communicator. And I was like, well, I can communicate certain things, but what's the power that lay behind it, right? So that could be a struggle, it could be a theme. Or there's a theme about finding love, true love, connected, deep, powerful love. Or there's a theme of finding one's power, right? So those are the themes I'm talking about. There's so many of them. And we're all going to have, a major theme within our life existence that's going to challenge us throughout the years, of the whole lifetime, right? Hopefully we can achieve and overcome it, but it will be part of that process. So again, we're looking at how this is the ending. And again, those themes, those things that hold us back, if we have that theme that we're being challenged and we haven't quite finally achieved it yet, This is what I'm talking about with the new moon in Scorpio, that deep desire, that dream that lives so deeply within you that sometimes we're afraid to share. Maybe we're embarrassed to share it, maybe because we don't feel like we'll be accepted or we won't be received, which is the same thing. But, this is that opportunity to bury those past wounds and say, no more. I let go, I release the ending. This is the season for endings. This is the season of burial, right? Putting it in, let it compost. Let the process of the next 6 weeks bring you into into winter solstice. The process of the next 6 weeks of that bring you into what you're going to be bringing in your strength, your power. And whenever we're calling in our strength and our power, we're going to be challenged by it because we have to learn how to really, encompass it. We have to learn how to really embody it. We have to know exactly what that is and exactly what it's not. We have to learn how to really work it to work for us well. Because once we start to access some of the things that we want for ourselves, we're going to have to fail at it miserably several times for us to really be like, oh God, I got this now. Because it's a learning process. Everything's a learning process. Now, I also want to just bring it back just based on the amount of time. So, because last week I was talking about dark demonic energies, which exist, they exist. Now, I just also want to say that they exist, but they don't exist nearly as much as we think. I have no idea how you think about that. So we'll just let that go. However, I brought that up because, let me see if I can get my words out here. We talked about how there's lesser demons that work one-on-one, where they'll come in and work on one person and they'll try to suck their life force. And so we can see a lot of that in horror movies and things like that right now at this time of the season. So it applies. We can also look at demons on how there's mid-sized demons and how they work on mid-sized groups, church congregations, mafia, gangs, narco, like these groups that have congregations or groups that have multiple peoples that are all part of it, right? And then we also have the larger demons, also known as the greater demons, which can get into the institutions and the institutions of power. So this is again about power control, manipulation, greed, oppression. So those are those tendencies that live within that energetic. Those, if we look at, so I call them malevolent. Mal as in bad translates through, as not helpful, not good. And then we have benevolent, which are the good, helpful, the angelic hierarchies. We have a lot of different types of benevolent beings that, I'm going to talk more about after we get through the season. But this is that thing. This is where we begin to look to see, okay, look at the season. What's happening even right now on the energetic, and especially within the United States. And for many of you who watch this, I believe many of you are in the United States, and we can see what is the energy, especially with the politics. And I bring this forward because it's endings and beginnings, right? And so no matter what, we're going to have a major cultural shift, because Pluto is entering Aquarius, and there's not just Pluto. I think there's like 5 other planets that are entering in new signs. And when that happens, huge shifts happen. If it's not, I don't know if Pluto's the 5th one. So there's at least 4 more other planets entering into these huge signs that are going to shift what's familiar and comfortable and the way we've been living for the last 20 years. The last 20 years, the power's been in structure, top-down structure, which is why the billionaires are all wanting to kind of hoard and keep, they're not paying attention to global warming and the climate crisis. They're not paying attention to, those who have and those who have nots. They just want to keep having the power. So it's a power differentiation, right? And so things are going to shift, and there's going to be all sorts of different kinds of things. So we're looking at endings and beginnings, and I wanted to bring it in because this is the season. that not just with the election that's about to happen on Tuesday for us, for those who are in the United States, but that this is a whole shift that I started talking about from the moment I started the show way back in March. I said, there is no coincidences that this show is coming to at this time. And all of these shows have been preparing you for the shift, actually. So it's very specific that we're coming into this place. And again, and no matter what, I've been kind of a little bit like heightened in the politics, just being like, wow, look at how much, dark energy is trying to oppress and take away freedom and free will and choice. I've been kind of like, playing that game, just like noticing, and probably watch a little bit too much politics on the YouTube. But it's just fascinating. It's fascinating. But no matter where I stand, no matter which way it goes, I know that everything that's happening is on this much greater trajectory for the people. Not top down anymore. We're moving out of Capricorn. We're moving into Aquarius. Now it comes back to the people, and we're going to unify in however way we do it. That's still yet to be known. And we're going to come from bottom up, and we're going to move through change. We're going to have a new beginning. There's so many things that are happening in this astrology this next month. Huge. And so even with these dark forces are going to get a pushback because they want to take away our freedom, free will, our choice, our power, right? And the thing is that the more we become aware, the more we raise our consciousness, the more we unify, the more we start to allow each other to have freedom, free will, and choice, the more we say, hey, you know what? I don't like what you're doing, and I don't align with it, but I'm going to give you unconditional love because you really need it, because that's what's going to help you kind of overcome your challenges. I'm going to be compassionate that you're at the effect of your life and the way that you are. I'm going to forgive you for having the level of mindset or thinking or, lack of your own personal power to see, that you need to take other people's power from them, right? I'm going to forgive you for being in that consciousness. So this is this opportunity. And again, this is kind of why I've been trying to connect all these things together, because there's so many things. There's so many connection points. And again, like even talking about the holidays, we could talk about this for, a whole week show, right? Because there's so many beautiful things about this time of the season. So with that, I know that we are nearing our time together tonight. And so I called it a Halloween special. It's just special because it's such a special time of the season. It's a special time of humanity. So it's our time. It's our time to bury the past wounds. It's time to bury the fear. It's time to really tap into that Scorpio deep desire of what do you want for you and your loved ones, right? So this is where we begin to see that and bring that forward. This is about your truth. Who are you in the core of your truth, right? Even if it feels uncomfortable to expose that. And the Scorpio shadow part of it, that stinging of the scorpion, is that if I expose myself and I'm vulnerable and you can see who I truly am and you don't accept me or receive me, then I'm going to hide. I'm going to kind of stab you with my with my stinger. Don't hurt me. I'm vulnerable, right? So I just wanted to pull that piece in there as well. But again, it's always a pleasure to bring this information to you. And again, the cycles of the year are so powerful when we understand how we are so intricately connected to it, right? And so again, of course, it's a pleasure with you. And if you want to connect with me in any way, you know how to do it. There's my website at www.andreadragonfly.com. There's also my Facebook and Instagram at connected.dragonfly. So actually, I wish you all a great ending and a great beginning, and to really connect into the season. So be well, everybody. Take care. It's always a pleasure. I hope to see you next week.
This has been Connected with your host, Andrea Dragonfly. Join Andrea each week on an extraordinary journey, exploring the consciousness of energy and how you are connected. Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.